Alright everybody, what is up? It's the Odd Programmer and today we are going to discuss ViewBinding and Android. So let's jump right into it. ViewBinding library allows us to interact with views more efficiently and easily. Once it is active in an app module, it generates separate binding classes for each layout file in the module. An instance of the binding class contains reference to all the views present in the layout file with a valid ID. So it removes all the boilerplate code of find view by ID. Using ViewBinding has its own advantages over alternatives like butter knife, cordless synthetic, etc. And we'll see that advantages at the end of this video. First, we learn how to enable and use ViewBinding library. So let's get started. In this tutorial, we will make games test application. Here's a quick look at what we will build using ViewBinding. First of all, this activity has a recycler view which will show a list of games which we will add. Here's the add button. When we tap on it, a new activity opens up to take the entry. First, we enter the name of the game, then we enter a short description of it. And finally, we give a star rating out of 5. After saving, it will show here. So it's our little application which we are going to build using ViewBinding. We are using Room library for data storage. If you want to learn more about Room, we already have it covered in my MVVM series. I'll give the link in the description. So, first of all, clone this repository to set up the project. Link will be given in the description. After cloning, import it into Android Studio. Make sure you are using Android Studio version 3.6 and above, because older versions don't support ViewBinding. After importing completes, explore the project structure. All the components are already set up. In fact, you can go ahead and run the application. It will work the same as shown, but the difference is that it is without ViewBinding. Just open up main activity and you will see these find view by IDs. So, first of all, open your modules build.gradle file and add this line to enable ViewBinding. Next, open main activity file. Create a new private variable to hold the instance of binding class. As you can see here, the binding class generated is activity main binding. So it gets this name from the layout XML file. As you can see here, the layout file name is activity main. So the binding class generated has this in camel case and the word binding is postfixed. Next, right after super.onCreate, we have initialized our binding variable. We are using this inflate static method. Every generated binding class has this method, which takes in a layout inflator object. In our case, we are passing the layout inflator of our activity. Next, we are doing a set content view, but instead of passing in the ID of layout file, we pass the root property of our binding class, which holds the instance for the root of our layout file. Next, we are initializing some views. In your version, you will have some classic find view by ID here, so replace all those with the binding classes properties. As I already mentioned that ViewBinding will create a property for each view with a valid ID. So as you can see here in the XML file, each view with the ID will have a generated property in the binding class. If we want the ViewBinding to ignore particular views, we have to add this attribute ViewBinding ignore is equal to true. It is mentioned in the official documentation, but it's not working for me. Even after adding this attribute, properties are still generating for views with an ID. It's a bug maybe, or maybe I'm doing something wrong. Anyway, that's it for the main activity class. Next, open up add activity class and do the same thing we did with main activity. First, create a variable for binding class. Next, we initialize it with the inflator method. Then we are setting the root to set content view. And finally, we get the instance of all the views via properties from the binding class. So that's all for this class. Last step is to enable ViewBinding in the adapter class for the recycler view. So open the game adapter file under the adapter directory. First, create two variables for the binding class. The first one is a var with the nullable type. Second is a val whose getter is set to return the not null value of the previous variable. We have done this because this way we can set the binding to null when the adapter gets detached from the recycler view. Next, scroll down below to the ViewHolder class and edit this static method from, which is used to return the ViewHolder class instance. So, make this method take in a binding object as a parameter and then pass it to the ViewHolder class constructor. Next, edit the class constructor to take in the binding object instead of the item view. Next, pass this binding.root here, then remove all this find view by IDs here. Then change these below to refer to the ViewBinding class. Next, scroll back up to the onCreateViewHolder function. Get the layout inflator instance, then set the binding instance via the inflate method. As you may have noticed, the signature of this inflate method is different from what we used in the activities. This inflate method can be used in adapters, fragments, etc. Finally, we are returning the ViewHolder instance via from static method. Next, override this onDetached from recycler view function, and after the super call, set the binding variable to null to clear up the binding reference after the adapter has been detached from the recycler view. So that's all for the adapter class. You can go ahead and run the application, and congratulations, you have successfully migrated an application to ViewBinding library. You can head over to the GitHub repository and check out the ViewBinding branch to take reference. So, as we head towards the end of the video, let's see what are the advantages of ViewBinding over other alternatives. So in comparison with find view by ID, ViewBinding provides null safety because ViewBinding creates direct references to the views, so there is no fear of providing any invalid ID and falling into null pointer exception. Even if some views are made so that they are present in certain configurations like landscape view, they are marked with @nullable, which will force us to handle the nullability. Next is type safety. Since the fields in binding class have matching types from the view, hence there is no exception for class casting. In comparison with data binding, ViewBinding has important advantages like a faster compilation. Since ViewBinding doesn't require any annotations processing, therefore the compile time is faster than data binding. Plus, there is no special formatted layout file required for ViewBinding to work, unlike data binding. Finally, in comparison with Kotlin Synthetic, ViewBinding has advantages because it can be used in Java as well as Kotlin, whereas Kotlin Synthetic can only be used in Kotlin. Also, Kotlin Synthetic can lead to some null pointer exceptions because of referring to the views which are not present in the current inflated layout. So, that's all for this video. Hope you learned something good today. Good luck for the future, and don't forget to like, subscribe and do all that good stuff. This is the Odd Programmer. Peace out.